In today's episode of A Cabinet Vision Minute, I'll be talking about Shadowline construction, a new feature of construction methods introduced to core cabinets in Cabinet Vision 2021. Let's get started. This episode of A Cabinet Vision Minute is brought to you by Craftsman Engineering. Craftsman Woodworks Engineering Services is your first stop for personalized one-on-one cabinet vision training and consulting services. Visit Craftsman Engineering today at craftsmanengineering.com to learn more about upping your cabinet vision game. So here's the plan for today. We're going to be talking about these things. What is Shadowline? Some considerations we need to consider before we start. Setting up materials, setting up material schedules, setting up the assembly methods, and also some practical application considerations. So what is Shadowline? So Shadowline is this detail used a lot in commercial, but it's basically this application of a channel that will likely span multiple cabinets. So there are two ways of doing this typically, and this is typically applied to a base cabinet. But just reading from this, Shadowline is a frameless style construction method which provides finger pull access to doors and drawers while providing a heavy lateral line design feature, typically to base cabinets. The two types of Shadowline that I mentioned are a hardware Shadowline, which is like a 12-foot aluminum extrusion cut to length to cover and span a run of cabinets. The other kind of Shadowline would be a build-it-yourself type of application of the same thing, only instead of using extruded aluminum, you might make a U-shaped piece of material that would span also across several cabinets, giving you kind of a cleaner look and feel. So the first consideration is then, are we going to make our components as like this one would be? This would be a component that you would make yourself, a Shadowline rail, or are we going to buy the extrusion? This would be typical of that, an aluminum extrusion. I've seen Headitch makes, there are several manufacturers of this, but Headitch, for example, makes an aluminum extrusion in 2 different sizes and in 3 different finishes. I believe a white, an aluminum, and a black anodized aluminum finish. So what is our intended look and feel of Shadowline? So with Shadowline, you can place this, what we're going to call this an extrusion, just because it's easier to classify them all as the same for the purposes of conversation. But are we going to put a line up here, for example, a line between our drawers? This one does not have one between there, but it does have a line here. And you can also place it on the bottom. Another application would be a vertical application of Shadowline. So the first thing we want to do is set up our material manager so that we have, I'm going to use channel today, but you would also use this for any Shadowline material. I'm going to open the material manager. And in the material manager, there is not, out of the box, there is not a category like there is for board stock or banding or any of these others. There isn't one for Shadowline. I created one for Shadowline. If you don't know how to create a category in your material manager, here's how I did that. I simply pushed this create group, created a group, and it added it just below the one that I had outlined there already. I'm going to right click on new folder, push rename. So this is my Shadowline 2 group, and you can move this around and place it where you want to. I like to keep things in alphabetical order personally, but you don't necessarily have to. You can place your group wherever you want to. So by default, there's nothing in the group that you create. And so what I'm going to do is then add a Shadowline. I'm going to add some Shadowline extrusion to this Shadowline group. by simply pushing new, and the type is, it automatically went to Shadowline channel because I've been playing with this, but it probably would default to banding if you were to do this just by opening up Cabinet Vision fresh. So find Shadowline channel in this. Now remember, I'm using aluminum extrusion, so I want to say Shadowline channel. So I'm going to add this head etch extrusion that comes in two sizes, as I mentioned. One is 42 millimeters high by 25 millimeters deep. The other is 52 millimeters high by 25 millimeters deep. And it comes in a 12-foot length. I believe 3,700 millimeters is somewhere around 12 feet. So I'm going to pick the smaller one first, and I'm going to call this one head etch 42 mm, description Shadowline. And what I would normally do here is I would type in the manufacturer's SKU. I don't remember that off the top of my head, but I'll make something up pretty close to that. And so the height and length, etc., I'm going to switch this over to millimeters right out of the catalog. 3,700 millimeters long, and the height is 42 millimeters, and the width of that extrusion is 25 millimeters, a little over an inch. Also remember that there are three types of channel. So this head etch type is of type C, this shape. And there's also J channel, which is close to C. It just doesn't have that sweep at the top. And then there is the L channel, which is open at the top. For what I'm doing right now, I'm using this C channel design. And I'm going to use the defaults for color and finish. Okay, so I have the 42 millimeter in there. I'm going to add one more by copying this one, and I'm going to rename it to 52. There's no difference between these two. So I'm going to go into this one, the 52 millimeter one that I just added, and I'm going to change the size of that Shadowline channel, and I can do that from the object tree. Okay, that's right, 52 millimeters. So that's all we need to do in the material manager. I'm going to close out of this. The next thing I want to do is I want to add our new material to a material schedule. So I'm going to pick pick this maple, and in the material schedule manager, you see under, when you open it, it'll probably look something like this. Under face is where you'll find the Shadowline part categories that are going to apply to this. So we added Shadowline channel, which is just these first two, and I need to explain what mid Shadowline channel is and what outer Shadowline channel is. So as best I could figure, outer Shadowline channel refers to the perimeter of a cabinet. So the top drawer, for example, between the top drawer and the countertop would be considered an outer Shadowline channel area. And I believe so would the bottom of a drawer next to the toe kick. So the bottommost and topmost would be considered outer, and inner or mid would be considered anything inside that perimeter, I believe. So, and it doesn't matter whether it's horizontal or vertical, these refer to only areas, perimeter or not perimeter Shadowline. I'll try to touch on those terms again a little bit later on. So I'm going to select the two Shadowline areas. I'm going to put the smaller one in the middle, mid Shadowline, and I'll put the larger one in the outer Shadowline area. And remember that since this is just a material schedule, it doesn't have anything to do with placement other than these types of placement that we're going to do. So we'll talk about the actual placement from the construction manager, which answers the question, how do you build your cabinet? So let's go there now. One more thing before I go over to the construction manager. So a Shadowline bracket and Shadowline edge and Shadowline rail. Shadowline bracket refers to the hardware that would go on the end of a channel. I didn't touch on that yet, but you may want to add that if you're going to have machining that is going to accommodate Shadowline bracket. Otherwise, I might recommend to just leave that out. Typically, I believe most Shadowline is installed in the field by your installers. They may even be cutting the Shadowline extrusion to length in the field. A Shadowline edge and a Shadowline rail refer to parts that you might make yourself or might cut on your saw or machine yourself. So I'm leaving those blank also because for this demonstration today, I'm only using the channel. All right, so let's go over to the our assembly manager, and I'm going to copy a commonly used construction method that I like, and we're going to go over modifications to that to make it Shadowline friendly. Okay, so I'm going to take this one, CWES 32 millimeter. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to name it Shadow 32 millimeter. So now for all intents and purposes, this is exactly the same as the other construction method. So if you expand these areas here, we'll see that there are two sections that we may or may not want to, we may definitely want to deal with this one on the exterior case Shadowline, but we may not have anything to do with the connection Shadowline area down there. So let's go in and dive in and look at see what these do, and let's talk about each one of the standards as we go through there. So I'm first going to go through this Shadowline here under exterior case. It's the first question is, do you want to use the Shadowline construction method? And this isn't necessarily yes or no. It's a no, yes, yes. So one yes is the build-up method, and that would be this type where you would build it yourself. And what I meant by Shadowline rail would be this piece on the back. This would be considered a Shadowline rail, the one that I mentioned a few minutes ago when we were in the material schedule manager. And this would be the other piece that you would make, but this is the the most visual. So this would be build up, as opposed to hardware. So this has it's depicted here as a C channel, but you could also have a J channel in there or an L channel in there. So I'm going to pick the hardware option, and it's going to take us down that path a little bit. We still have some other questions to answer. Define banding, no banding for the edge. This question, this standard, is kind of confusing because it appears that this is only referring to a drawer, but it's really not. It's asking where you want to deal with Shadowline when it's above a drawer or below a drawer or to the side of a drawer. So this shows I want to use horizontal Shadowline in this fashion as opposed to a vertical Shadowline, which would run up and down the sides of a drawer. So I'm going to answer horizontal Shadowline for drawers. It's going to ask me later on the same questions for doors, which I'll answer the same way as the drawer questions. So yes, I want to use Shadowline horizontally. Do you apply horizontal Shadowline hardware to your top drawer? Yes. So this to me means, am I going to put Shadowline below the countertop and above the top drawer? That's how I interpret this question. The next question is, do you apply horizontal Shadowline hardware to your middle drawer? Yes. So between drawers, do I want Shadowline there? Yes. Do I want to apply horizontal Shadowline hardware to your bottom drawer? I'm going to answer no. That's down by the toe kick. That's not to say it's not done. It's just for me, I'm going to choose not to use Shadowline on the bottom of a drawer when it's down at the toe kick. Okay, again, it's going to start asking me the same questions for doors. Now I'm going to answer them in the same way. Do you want to apply hardware or horizontal hardware to your top door? Yes. Do you want to apply horizontal Shadowline to your middle door? Yes. And do you want to apply horizontal Shadowline to your bottom door? No. Do you apply a vertical Shadowline? For me, no vertical today, just horizontal. So no, no. Okay, now this is kind of a funny question Standard number 108 refers to the horizontal Shadowline hardware offset. I'm leaving my horizontal hardware offset to 0. What this is asking is, do you want to take this Shadowline channel and move it up by a positive number, less than 1 inch, or down a negative number, less than 1 inch? For me, I choose no. You can do this. There is some advantages to doing this in some cases. For me, there is no clear advantage to doing this now. I'm leaving this answer to standard 108 as 0. Okay, the bottom adjustment here in standard 129 refers to how much you want to drop down this top drawer or door into this area a little bit. I'm going to say 1/4 of an inch. I don't know exactly how much the distance is across this channel, the thickness of the material, but I'm going to guess it's like 1/8 of an inch. And then I want to go down another 1/8 of an inch, kind of to give my fingers a little bit of pull, behind that door or drawer. So I'm going to say bring that down 1/4 of an inch. And then same on the bottom side. Do I want to bring this up? Yeah, let's bring that up about the same. So I'm going to say 1/4 of an inch. For vertical, it's asking me the same questions. I'm not going to answer those edge adjustments. Now this is a poorly worded question, but a very important question nevertheless. This is standard number 56. Do you want to have Shadowline notch on finished end? The default is no, but I want to say yes, I do want a notch on a finished end. Why? Because in most cases, what I want is an applied door or an applied end, applied panel for my finished end. So I want that channel to go through a finished end and treat it just as it would an unfinished end, for example. But more importantly, what this does is it treats the sub end the same as it would for as an unfinished end. So it's going to notch that inside my sub end. Very important. So this is worded completely odd. I think if I were to word it myself, I would say, do you want to have Shadowline notches go through your sub ends? That to me makes a whole lot more sense. That's only because I'm thinking in terms probably of using the unapplied door. So that's all the questions, all the standards I need to answer for this. I'm going to come back to this reveals here in a minute because we do want to touch on that, but I want to demonstrate what happens if we don't use that reveals question in there, which I'm going to get to in a minute. But skipping down here to connection under Shadowline, there's only one question in here, so I double click on that, and it's just simply asking about the connections, which we don't really need to worry about, none of which have to do with channel. So I'm just going to push finish for now. And remember that this is our Shadow CWS32, and I've already set up the material schedule. So let's go and look at that. So I'm going to set up a new job, and we want to make sure we pick our Shadow 32, and the materials were maple, I believe. And let's make sure our doors are slab in our drawer. Let's put a wall in there, and let's add a base cabinet. Let's add 2 base cabinets. And it did. It applied some channel there, but it made our top drawer ugly thin. We wanted, or at least in my construction method, I said that I want my top drawer to be at least 5 inches, or not at least, I want it to be 5 inches dead on. It did not do that, but it did apply this top channel rather, Shadowline channel, and it applied the smaller one just as I said. And zooming in a little bit, we can see that this 1/4 of an inch extends over the top of the C channel there a little bit, so that we can get our finger in there and grab onto that drawer or door. Okay, so let's go back to reveals and adjust this. Let's adjust this top drawer so that it looks more appropriate, and I'll explain that a little bit. Back to our construction schedule, which was Shadow 32. Okay, and we want to go into this area that says reveals, because it is in here where the top drawer dimension is specified. Fast forwarding till we get to the question about top drawer right here. Okay, so I believe what is going on with this question, or with this standard number 165, is since we've added in some channel up here at the top and some channel at the bottom here, it looks to me like Cabinet Vision is taking some of that real estate, in this case the 5 inches, and it's subtracting out the thickness of our top channel, which I believe was 52 millimeters, and it's subtracting out half of the bottom channel, which was 42 millimeters. So 52, all of 52 millimeters for the top, plus 21 millimeters for the bottom. So I think what I want to do is add that back in to this, so that the top drawer width is now going to be wide enough, including all the channel that is there. So I'm going to make this in millimeters, and I'm going to add back in plus 52 plus 21 for a total of 200 millimeters. So that should give me somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 inches as we look at it with the shadow line in it. So let's go back and look at that now. Open up our job, utilities, update job for construction. And now let's look at that one more time. So that looks better in my professional design opinion. So if we wanted to measure that, let's look at one of these. I'm going to go to EnView, and I'm going to use the measure tool and just measure a few things here. So the top drawer height is 5 11/16. It's a little bit bigger than what I first had, but I'm going to leave it the way it is, like the way it looks. We can also see that we have that overhang here. We have the extra 1/4 inch that we added to it, measuring from here to here, and from here to here, and also from here to there, 1/4 inch. It did, since this is the outer channel, it used the larger of those. And so let's use our measure tool to see what happened there. So from the top of the top to the bottom of this channel is 2 1/16. And if I showed that in millimeters, 52 millimeters, dead on. Okay, just want to show you one other thing that is going on here. It always puts this, looks like a drawer stretcher, but I'm going to call it a Shadowline Strongback. So it gives some strength to this Shadowline, and it may provide for some manufacturers a place to mount the Shadowline channel instead of an end bracket. All right, I'm going to go to the face of this now. So let's double click on this cabinet, and we know that the end on this is a finished end, and this is not the look and feel that I'm looking for. I want an applied door, an applied end to this. And since we answered that standard to notch the finished ends, it did indeed do that. It gave us a notch finished end. However, that's not the look I'm going for. I want to put an applied door on here. So let's see what happens with an applied door. So I'm going to pick an applied door for this left end. That's the look I'm looking for. I just noticed one other thing here. I'm not using stretchers for the top. So my stretchers, I thought, or my top, as in this case, I thought would be behind that channel, but it's not. So it looks like it's the right size. It just moved it forward for some reason. Let's measure that. Distance from there to there is probably 25 millimeters. It is 25 millimeters. So I guessed right on that. Okay, so I need to adjust this top back by 25 millimeters. So that would be the Z minus 25. Great, and that pushed it back. That looks proper. Okay, that was a first for me. I haven't noticed that before. Okay, so we have the larger Shadowline channel on the top, the smaller one here. We've adjusted the drawer and we have the look we want. If you don't answer that question properly with the finished end, notching for the finished end, what we would get when we have this applied door on here is we would see the sub end. We would actually see that here. So the channel would die into the sub end rather than into the applied door. So that's what the effect of that, answering the question that way, is. So that's Shadowline, and I think that's all I wanted to cover today. We'll see you on the next Cabinet Vision Minute.